In the previous lesson, we related how the Alter Rebbe, before he was arrested, told his brother-in-law, Rabbi Saul Kozik, that someone should go immediately to Rebbe Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev and should give him a pidyon nefesh. Pidyon nefesh, in Chassidic terminology, means to write for a bracha for a specific individual. So he wanted the chassid to go to Rebbe Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev to ask for a bracha for the Alter Rebbe. When he came to Rebbe Levi Yitzchak and he told him what had happened to the Alter Rebbe, Rebbe Levi Yitzchak was so overwhelmed he fell on the floor and he was screaming and crying and shouting out of anguish. And then he said to the chassid, "Tell me, when the Alter Rebbe was arrested, was he deeply upset from this?" The chassid said, "No, only superficially." And he saw this because he saw that he forgot to take his slippers, but he didn't forget to take his towels and film. Rebbe Levi Yitzchak was very impressed with this answer, and he said, "The Litvak cooked good." The Litvak means the Lithuanian. The Alter Rebbe's Chassidim were considered Lithuanians. Has a good perception. He observes things well. Then Rebbe Levi Yitzchak asked him for the Alter Rebbe's mother's name, and he realized that he forgot to inquire. He was so overwhelmed by what had happened, he forgot to ask, what is Alter Rebbe's mother's name? So on the table there, Rebbe Levi Yitzchak, there was a chumash, and he opened the chumash to Pashas Miketz, and over there were words which said, "Vayar ki yesheva b'Mitzrayim." Vayar Yaakov ki yesheva b'Mitzrayim. And Rebbe Levi Yitzchak said the word Sheva is spelled Shin Beis Reish, and it stands for Shin Shneir Ben Rivka. Naturally, when a person sees this and sees the Reish, it can stand for any name that starts with a Reish. But we're talking about a tzaddik in the caliber of Rebbe Yitzchak Berditchev, so we saw the truth that the Reish stands for Rivka. Even though the Alter Rebbe's full name was Shneir Zalman, but it's true that there were times the Alter Rebbe used to sign his name Shneir Ben Rivka. That very night, after the Alter Rebbe was arrested, the Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe had an emergency meeting. And these were basically the Chassidim who were from Cheder Aleph and Beis and Gimel. In other words, these were the greatest Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. Everyone respected them. And they got together for an emergency meeting, and they came up with certain resolutions. First of all, they themselves announced that they were going to be totally devoted and dedicated exclusively to do everything they can until the Alter Rebbe is back home. And to divorce themselves totally from everything else going on in their life, to stop everything, put everything on hold, and immerse themselves, and everything that they possess would be dedicated only for this purpose. And they came up with a number of resolutions. One was that all the Chassidim should fast every Monday and Thursday. Another one was that during the week when they're eating, they should eat only bread and water. And even Shabbos, Friday night and Shabbos, when they eat a Suda, they should only eat one cooked item. During this time period that Alter Rebbe is arrested, nobody should arrange to have a wedding. And if there's a wedding that was arranged from before this time, then it should be without music, only one male, and there shouldn't be more than 10 people there, and meat shouldn't be given at that meal. Another point was that all the teachers who teach young students should gather together as students, say Tehillim with them every single day, and to explain to them what is going on with the Alter Rebbe, and what it means that the tzaddik of the generation is arrested because of the sins of the generation, and that it only happened because of a false accusation. Another resolution was that all the Chassidim should gather together their own families, their wives and sons and daughters, and talk to them about what happened, how the Alter Rebbe is suffering, and what great crime was committed by those people who informed the Tsar's government against the Alter Rebbe, and the great reward of all those that participate in the Alter Rebbe's pain, and naturally do everything to help. Another resolution was that all the Chassidim will make sure to maintain everything that was going on before financially, which means that all the money that was needed to support the Alter Rebbe's family, that will continue. The money that was collected to help the families in Eretz Yisrael, that will continue. In fact, every one of the Chassidim was asked to make a list of his financial possessions, of his kalim, of his vessels, of gold and silver, of his jewelry, and that in case it would be a time where that would be needed, they should be able to take that immediately. They also made a resolution of God forbid any one of the Chassidim would pass away during this time, that there would be a whole procedure done which would have the neshama of the departed chassid given an oath that he must go to the chamber of the Mazitcha Magid and the Baal Shem Tov and to inform them that Alter Rebbe is arrested and Teres HaChassidus, the teachings of Chassidus, is in tremendous danger. They should repeat this oath 3 times, and this was another avenue of how to bring about the salvation of the Alter Rebbe. This committee divided themselves into 3 groups of activists. One that would be occupied exclusively and directly with saving the Alter Rebbe. One would be occupied primarily with the financial issues, getting the money that was needed to save the Alter Rebbe, supporting the Alter Rebbe's family, and making sure that all the money that have to go to Eretz Yisrael to support the families the Alter Rebbe always supported with the Koil Chabad should continue. And there was a 3rd group. Their function was to travel to all the different communities where Chassidim were and to give them strength and encouragement and inspiration and to do everything they possibly can to teach everyone about the Alter Rebbe's approach of Chassidus and to bring new Chassidim. Which is interesting to note that in the time that Alter Rebbe was being arrested for spreading Chassidus, this is the resolution that they made, not only not to stop the work that's to be done, but adrabah, to continue it in even a more aggressive way than before. The Alter Rebbe was arrested on a Thursday. So the following day was Friday, and 6 hours before candlelighting, the Alter Rebbe didn't want to travel anymore. Because before Shabbos, one shouldn't be traveling. So he asked this minister who was in charge of this whole group that they should stop the journey until after Shabbos. Of course, he wouldn't hear of it. Suddenly, the axle of the Alter Rebbe's wagon broke. So the one in charge told his people to go to the nearest village and to get someone to bring people that can fix it. They fixed it. They were all set to move again, and suddenly one of the horses died. So they went to the village to get a new horse. After they hooked up the new horse, suddenly they found that both horses together weren't moving. They tried everything they can to make the horses move, and they wouldn't budge from their place. That's when this minister recognized Alter Rebbe is not an ordinary person, and obviously if he doesn't want the wagon to move, it's not going to move. So he said to Alter Rebbe, well, at least give us permission that we can move and stay in the next village. We shouldn't have to stay out here on the road. Alter Rebbe didn't agree. So he said, well, then allow us just to go to the side of the road at least, not to be in the middle of the road. That the Alter Rebbe agreed, and they went to the side of the road, and the Alter Rebbe was spent Shabbos under a tree. In fact, the Chassidim of the city of Nevel knew where that tree was because it's near the city of Nevel, and they were able to point to the tree and show this is the exact spot where the Alter Rebbe spent Shabbos. In fact, there was an older chassid from the city of Nevel. His name was Mechol de Alta. And he would talk about this place that the Chassidim who knew the exact spot. And they were able to point the finger and say, this is the place where the Alter Rebbe spent Shabbos. And he said, I myself went there to see it with my eyes. And I saw that on both sides of the road, all the trees that are standing there are old trees and broken trees. And this particular part of the Alter Rebbe spent Shabbos is a big, beautiful tree with a lot of branches, which obviously Hashem made that the Alter Rebbe should be comfortable over Shabbos. And when this chassid of Mechol Alta used to talk about what he saw and the details of the place, he would speak about it with such inspiration, with such excitement, and the excitement was from the godliness that he saw in this incident, that what one would see on this chassid was perhaps more inspiration in talking about this incident than others would get inspiration from learning a Chassidic Maimon. One of the things that we see from this story is, and this is something which the previous Rebbe speaks about in his Sichos, and our Rebbe also speaks about this in the Sichos, that we see from this story and other details that the Alter Rebbe was arrested. It appears to be that this was something which he had no control over, and suddenly we see that he was the one who had them stop the wagon, and when he desired, the wagon started moving again. Which means that a tzaddik like the Alter Rebbe, a tzaddik of this caliber, is in control. And therefore the fact that he was arrested was only because the Alter Rebbe agreed to go through with the arrest. And he realized that there's a divine purpose and a divine mission in going through with the arrest, as we'll explain it later, and that's why it happened. In fact, the story we told in the previous lesson, how before the Alter Rebbe allowed himself to be arrested, he thought it over, and he consulted with Reb Shmuel Munkes and other Chassidim, is also an indication that if not for the fact that the Alter Rebbe agreed to be arrested, it never would have happened. And here we see that even after he was arrested, and it was already in the hands of these soldiers, under their control, nevertheless, he was the one that was in control, and when he wanted not to move, he didn't move. When they brought the Alter Rebbe to the actual jail, the Alter Rebbe was put in a specific part of the jail, which was reserved only for those who were accused of high treason and very, very sensitive issues. The Alter Rebbe wanted to know if once a person is arrested in this part of the jail, does that mean that they don't come out of there alive? He wanted to know whether anybody ever came out alive in this part of the jail. The Alter Rebbe knew, though, that if he's going to ask the guards such a question, of course, they won't answer him. So Alter Rebbe began a discussion with the guard and asked him, how do they pay you? What is your salary? And he answered him. Then the Alter Rebbe said to the guard, tell me, when people are released from this jail, do they give you a tip? Do you get anything extra from them? And the guard said, well, there are some people that do and some people that don't. With this, the Alter Rebbe heard that people do come out alive from these quarters, and this calmed the Alter Rebbe. There was an incident that happened with one of the ministers who was in charge of the Alter Rebbe, that he was very impressed with the Alter Rebbe because of something that had happened. And this led to a lot of other things and favors that he did for the Alter Rebbe. This minister was an extremely educated person, and he was also educated in Torah. And he said to the Alter Rebbe, I have a question to ask you. Will you answer me if I ask you a question? The Alter Rebbe said, you can ask whatever you wish. What does it mean, he said, when it says in the Chumash, in Bereshis, that Hashem spoke to Adam, and he said to him, Ayeka, where are you? Doesn't Hashem know where everybody is? Why did he have to ask him, where are you? So the Rebbe answered him what it says in Rashi, which is that the only reason he said Ayeka was just a way of breaking into a conversation with him. But of course Hashem knew where he was. So the minister said to the Alter Rebbe, what Rashi says, I know myself. I want to know what the Rebbe says. What is your interpretation? So the Alter Rebbe said to the minister, tell me, do you believe that the Torah is eternal and the Torah is applicable to all times and all people and all generations? So the minister answered, yes, I believe that. That alone brought great joy to the Alter Rebbe to hear from him that this is a person who believes in Hashem, and that this, in fact, which is the Shita of Baal Shem Tov, the eternity of Torah, that it applies to all times and all places, that's what he's being judged for his devotion and loyalty to the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. But now that he heard that this person believes that, Alter Rebbe was sure that this would make his judgment lighter. The Alter Rebbe said, let me tell you what this means in a way that it could be applied to all times and all generations, to all people. The word Ayeka means, Hashem is saying to every person, Ayeka, where are you in this world? There's a certain limited amount of days and years designated to each person, and that is designated for the purpose of accomplishing things, to do good things towards Hashem and towards other people. And therefore, Ayeka means stop and think, where are you in your own personal world? How many years have passed, and what have you done in all these years and days? For example, the Alter Rebbe said, turning to him, looking at him in the face, and saying, for example, you lived X amount of years. When the Alter Rebbe said that, he gave the exact age of the minister. What did you do during this time? Did you do a favor to someone? The minister was so shocked. The Alter Rebbe gave the exact age, that he put his hands on the Alter Rebbe's shoulders, he slapped him on the shoulder and said, bravo! In other words, you did a great job. Then he began to ask the Alter Rebbe other questions, and the Alter Rebbe answered everything in an extremely brilliant way. Questions that he asked about Yiddishkeit, questions that he had on things that are written in the Gemara and the Talmud. The Alter Rebbe also answered him in an extremely brilliant way, and from great excitement, the words that came out of the minister's mouth was, this is absolutely godly. In addition to asking the Alter Rebbe questions that were directly connected to his arrest and the reason for his being arrested, he also asked him other questions just to have an understanding of his personality and of his wisdom and what kind of person he is. One of the things they once did was they locked the Alter Rebbe up in a dark room. There was absolutely no way that any light can get in there. And they left the Alter Rebbe there for quite some time. They wanted to know if there's any way the Alter Rebbe will be able to recognize the difference between day and night. All they had was a candle burning there. One day, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he said to the Alter Rebbe, why don't you go to sleep? It's so late at night already. It's after midnight. The Alter Rebbe said to them, it's only 5 minutes after 2 in the afternoon. When he asked the Alter Rebbe, how did you know what time it is and to be so exact? The Alter Rebbe said, every single day, there are Yud-based Tirufim of Shem Havaya that shine in this world. But at night, there are Yud-based Tirufim of Shem Adnai. And through these Tirufim, I know how to recognize whether it's day or night, and to know the exact hour. Naturally, this isn't the place to go into what this means according to Chassidus and Kabbalah. Just the general concept is that there are 12 hours during the day, 12 hours of the night, and every hour there's a different name of Hashem that's shining in this world. Naturally, we're talking about a spiritual light that shines. But there are, just like there are different lights in the physical world, that's how there are also spiritual lights that are different in the spiritual realm. Naturally, we can't see those lights, so it doesn't really make a difference to us. But the Alter Rebbe was a person that was able to perceive the difference in the spiritual light, just like we perceive the difference in physical light. So imagine if a person would have known that there's a system in this room that the first hour is a green light shining, the second hour a red light, the third hour a pink light, and the fourth hour a blue light, and so on and so forth, without a clock, just by seeing the color of the light, they'd be able to know what hour of the day it is. And within each hour there were different details depending on how many minutes in the hour it was. So this was the Alter Rebbe's answer. There's a different spiritual light that shines every hour, and within the hour there's a different spiritual light every minute. So therefore, judging by the light that I see, I knew that it's 5 minutes after 2 in the afternoon, not at night. The head of the police that was in charge of the jail expressed to the Tsar himself his personal opinion that the Alter Rebbe is an extremely great person, brilliant person, and he feels that he's a godly person. And according to his opinion, he's probably totally innocent, and these are just people who are probably jealous of him, and they found all sorts of false accusations just because of their jealousy. This opinion that was presented to the Tsar made him very curious, and he decided that he would like to meet with the Alter Rebbe himself personally to get his own personal opinion. But of course he didn't want the Alter Rebbe to know who he is. So he dressed up as an ordinary person, and he came to visit the Alter Rebbe in his jail, as if he's one of the ministers that's coming to question him. As soon as he walked in, the Alter Rebbe stood up and gave him honor which is normally deserving for a king. So he said to him, "Why do you give me such honor when I'm not a king?" So Alter Rebbe said, "You definitely are the king. Because it says in the Torah, Malchusa de'ara, Kei Malchusa de'Rekiah," which means that the kingdom here on earth is similar as a reflection of kingdom in heaven. When you walked in the room, I was overcome with such awe that I don't feel when any of the ministers come in. So I knew that you must be the king. And when this happened, the Tsar was also convinced that Alter Rebbe is really a godly person. During all this time that Alter Rebbe was sitting in jail, nobody knew where the Alter Rebbe was. They didn't even know if he was alive. However, something happened, and through this incident, that's how the Chassidim discovered that the Alter Rebbe is alive. And that is that this minister, who was so impressed with the Alter Rebbe, said to the Alter Rebbe one day, "I want to do you a favor. So tell me, what can I do for you?" Alter Rebbe said to him, "I want you to let my family know that I'm still alive, and that I hope that I'll be released from jail, and I'll be found not guilty." So the minister said to him, "How can I do this? I understand the people who are your opponents and got you arrested are also Jews, and they pretty much look the same like the Jews who are your followers. So when I meet a Jew in the street, how do I know if I'm talking to one of your enemies or one of your followers?" So Alter Rebbe said, "There's going to be a Jew on the streets of Petersburg that is wearing very unusual clothes. And this is my brother-in-law. His name is Yisrael Kozik. The reason is because before I left, I told him to go to Petersburg immediately. I'm sure he listened to me, that he didn't change his clothes. He just went the way he was to Petersburg. So I'm sure that if you'll see him, you can speak to him because he's my brother-in-law." So the minister said, "I promise you I'll do this," and he went out to the streets. He was going through the streets of the Petersburg, and sure enough, there he saw this Rebbe Yisrael Kozik. He called him over and he said to him, "Tell me, what is your name?" But Rebbe Yisrael Kozik, because he traveled with a false passport, he couldn't give his true name. So he gave a different name. As we mentioned before, the Alter Rebbe said, "Go immediately." And because the Alter Rebbe said immediately, a chassid knows that every word of the Rebbe is accurate. That means not to go home first to get a passport, just go right now. But you do need a passport, so he borrowed someone else's passport, and that's the name that he had to give. When the minister heard that he gave a different name, he said to him, "You're a liar." And he turned around and left. Rebbe Yisrael Kozik was very puzzled by this incident. He went back to the Chassidim who were there with him, and they discussed it. And they came to the decision that this couldn't be an ordinary story, there's something behind it. And they felt maybe the Alter Rebbe sent him to meet me. And maybe this is some sort of sign that something's going on. So they made up that he should go to the streets tomorrow again. And if he meets the person again, this time he should give him his true name. The minister, in the meantime, came back to the Alter Rebbe, and he told the Alter Rebbe what had happened. "I met somebody exactly the way you described, but he gave me a different name." So then the Alter Rebbe told him this is probably because of the passport. "And I'll tell you what to do. Go there tomorrow again, and if you go there tomorrow, he'll probably tell you his true name." He went the second day out into the streets, and he saw him again. And he said to him, "What is your name? What is your true name?" And he gave him his true name. And when the minister heard this, he didn't answer. He just turned around and started to move slowly in a different direction. And the chassid understood that he should follow him. The minister came to his house, and Rebbe Kozak waited outside to see what's going to happen. Suddenly he saw the window open, and a melon was thrown out the window. So Rebbe understood that this must be for him. He picked it up, and he went to bring it back to where the chassidim were waiting for him. They opened this melon, and they found in it a piece of paper written with the Alter Rebbe's Ksav Yad Kodesh, Alter Rebbe's handwriting. And it said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And with this, the chassidim knew the Alter Rebbe is alive, and there's still hope. They still had no idea where he was and the details, but this was enough to bring life to the chassidim. And a few days later, they also found out the details of where the Alter Rebbe was. How did they find that out? When the Alter Rebbe was in jail, after a few days, the Alter Rebbe didn't eat anything because there wasn't any kosher food. So the person who was in charge of the Alter Rebbe's jail thought that many people, when they get arrested, especially for treason, they don't eat or they do things to commit suicide. So the authorities won't be able to extract from them information. And he was sure this was the Alter Rebbe's motive as well. So he had guards come and tried to force the Alter Rebbe to eat. But the Alter Rebbe kept his mouth sealed, and there was no way they could open Alter Rebbe's holy mouth. And there was a lot of screaming and shouting, and this minister, who was very close to the Alter Rebbe now, heard the screaming and shouting, and he came by and he asked, "What's going on?" And they told him what's going on. So he said, "Listen, this is a man that you can't force him to do things with brutal force. He's an intelligent man, an educated person. You have to talk to him in an intelligent way. Leave it up to me." He sent them away, and he began speaking to the Alter Rebbe. And he said to the Alter Rebbe, "Why are you doing such a thing? In your Torah it says that a person who commits suicide loses a share in the world to come. So why are you doing that?" The Alter Rebbe told him the reason he's not eating has nothing to do with committing suicide. It's simply because the food isn't kosher. And under no circumstances will I eat stray food, even if I will have to lose my share in the world to come. So the minister said to him, "Tell me, if I'll get you kosher food, will you trust me that it's really kosher?" So the Alter Rebbe answered, "Right now, I have no need for solid foods, because my stomach is very weak. I just need something that would strengthen my stomach. If you can get something like that from a Jew, and you can guarantee me that nobody else will touch it except for you, until it reaches me, then I'll eat it." The minister agreed to do this, and he went to someone who lived in the city of Petersburg by the name of Mordechai Lepler. He's a very wealthy man, and he was a man who all the ministers respected him because he was an honest person and he did business in a very honest way. So he went to this person that he should prepare the kosher food. And he told him, "I need kosher food for a Jew." The heart of Reb Mordechai told him that this is probably for the Alter Rebbe, because it was quite unusual for this minister to come to him to ask for kosher food. So he prepared something for the Alter Rebbe, as the minister instructed him, and he put it into a dish, but underneath the food, he put a note. And he wrote on the note, "I'd like to know who's eating from my food, and where you are found." And he signed his name. When the minister brought this dish to the Alter Rebbe ate the food, and when he saw the note, the Alter Rebbe wrote back a note, and he left a little bit of food over, and with that little bit of food, his note was covered. And he told the minister, "Please bring it back and ask him for more food." When the chassidim opened the dish, they found the note. On the note it said, "I am eating from this food, and I'm found in this and this place." He told them exactly where he is in the jail. And then the Alter Rebbe wrote, and immediately to send someone to Vilna. Naturally, when this happened, the chassidim were brought back to life. Here they saw clearly about the Alter Rebbe where he's found, and the Alter Rebbe already gave them instructions what to do. They had no idea why someone should go to Vilna, but they were confident that the Alter Rebbe is telling them to send someone. There's definitely a purpose and something to accomplish there.